Audio test, audio test. Audio test. Audio test. Audio test. Welcome everyone to Webinar Wednesday. This webinar is being recorded so that you can come back and visit it later or share it with colleagues. This is our first webinar of 2020 and I'm excited to have such great turnout today and welcome you all. We're going to start off the year by focusing on preparing and planning great learning experiences. As usual with Click to Science, I'm focused on STEM and I talk a lot about STEM activities, but the strategies we're using today are going to work for whatever types of learning experiences you're trying to plan. We want to think about how to plan experiences that help staff maximize youth engagement, support inclusiveness, and of course safety in our programs as well. And this webinar is going to give you some new tools and strategies to improve your own skills if you're the one that does the planning for your program, or to help your staff develop their own capacity to plan and prepare for lessons. We want to create STEM learning experiences that are relevant, engaging, and appropriate for the youth in our programs. And we've tried to make it really simple today. It's going to be just a 4-step process that we're going to use to prepare for STEM learning experiences. And the first step, the one that we get the most questions about, is where do I go to find quality STEM activities? At Click to Science, we don't have a curriculum that we share. Specifically, we do have some STEM activities that are on the Click to Science site, but those activities have been selected because they give you an opportunity to practice a particular skill. So we have a great blog. It's an old one from 2015, but it was created just to address this question of where can we go to find quality activities. And that blog lists 10 really good websites where you can go to find STEM activities, including NASA sites or 4-H sites, or my favorite, which is How to Smile. Howtosmile.org is a great place to find informal STEM learning experiences, and they're really good activities there. It's a great site to search as well. So I've shared the link in the chat box for the blog that you can check that out and see the different sites that give you a starting place for finding STEM activities. Now you'll notice that we don't have any Pinterest sites on that in that blog. And that's not because we hate Pinterest. Click of Science has some great Pinterest boards, but it's really hard to tell when you're looking at a Pinterest activity whether it's going to be a high quality STEM activity or not. And so one of the other resources we've created for you is a tool for assessing whether the activity that you found is a high quality activity. So I will put the link in the chat box again for this one. There's going to be lots of links today. And what we are looking at in this resource is just a few points that you can review to tell you whether you've got a good activity. The goal isn't that you would necessarily throw out the activity if it doesn't do well on all of those points, but it gives you the suggestions on what you may need to add to or enhance in that activity in order to make it be a high quality learning experience for the youth in your program. The nice thing about the resource that I shared in the chat box, how do I know if it's a good STEM activity, is it something you can do to train your own staff. It only takes about 30 minutes to go through the checklist, to get familiar with it, and to try it out on an activity that you're planning. So I encourage you, if you are able to incorporate a short professional development experience like this into a staff meeting, to look at that resource as a possibility to use just to give a little bit of training to your staff to really help them address the quality of the activities that they're planning. So the training resource there takes you through how to use the checklist. It has a sample activity that you can use the checklist with included. But if you've got another activity that you're planning, I encourage you to select that, or even have staff come to the meeting, each of them with a different activity that they're getting ready to do, and go through the checklist using that activity. Because it really does help focus on the points that are going to make this experience engaging, that's going to make it inclusive of all learners, and make it fun for everyone. So again, it's not that you throw the activity out if it doesn't meet the checklist, but you use the points on this checklist to help make it a better activity. All right, we've got through 2 steps already. I told you this is a really simple process. The step 3 is to prepare yourself, to think about, if I'm going to do that activity, what are the things I need to do so that I'm ready to do it? And for this, I'm going to, yes, I see it. Sorry, I got distracted by a question in the chat box. If you click on the link to how do I know it's a good activity, it'll take you to the Click to Science website, and downloading that training resource, you'll get the checklist right there with it. We're going to go to the Click to Science website now. In fact, let me switch over which window we're sharing, because I want to share with you one of the videos that you can use with your staff to help them prepare. So the video we're looking at now is Getting Youth Ready to Do STEM. And this one, it is a good video to think about, how do I prepare myself for doing that STEM activity? And let me open up my chat window again so I can share this link. Sometimes the videos don't do a great job if your internet is a little bit slow. So I want to include that link in the chat box so that if you need to click on the link, you can do that. That'll take you to the website here. And in the video, Alex and Lamont here are going to talk to us about how they get ready for a STEM activity. As I share the video, I encourage you to notice what's happening and share some ideas in the chat box. What are the things that they emphasize about preparing for STEM? And what are the specific strategies they use? As you notice strategies that they're using, I encourage you to share those in the chat box. We'll come back and discuss those a little bit after the video. And I'll also invite you to share other strategies for preparing yourself for teaching STEM activities. Let's watch this video.
You have to prepare for these classes. And if you don't know a question or something doesn't go exactly as planned, don't panic. Just go through the process again. If you've prepared correctly, you should have the right process. Just try it over again.
Teaching STEM requires thoughtful planning and strategic preparation of materials. It might also require some brushing up on STEM content knowledge. Listen as these experienced instructors describe what they do to prepare for STEM learning with youth.
What I try to do is make sure that I brush up on all the concepts that I teach them before I even think about creating a lesson plan. I make sure that I'm completely aware of everything that I'm trying to communicate to them, because questions arise on the spot and you usually don't plan for them. So I always make sure that I'm well studied on any concept that I teach the kids. And then I take the time to understand the concept through their perspective.
Is our weight the same here as it is on the moon? No. No. Is our mass the same?
Yes.
We serve a variety of different communities, specifically here in the DC metro area. Sessions will look different depending on the group of learners. Youth voice, making sure that the activities that we select aren't just cookie cutter type activities, that they're able to be molded to the different groups, because some learners have more visual styles that they respond to. Some learners are more auditory. Some learners like to automatically get hands-on and get physical. So depending on the group, we generally try to tailor our activity to make sure that it's fitting their learning style.
Here's your box. If I put the ball here.
The setup of the room is crucial. It really is most impactful when you're able to have all of the learners facing you as the instructor. So you don't have to move around too much to get everybody's attention. You can kind of reel everybody back in. The activities that specifically focus on engineering involve a lot of group work. So we try to position everyone where they're able to work in a group but still be central enough that they can hear, they can have all their materials right in one spot, and they can interact with each other without feeling like they're in school. I think that's one of the important things, is to figure out a configuration that works for you as an instructor, but gives them the freedom to feel like, okay, this is fun, this is just an activity that we're doing, but still gives them that structure that they need to accomplish the goal. One time, that's the end of the class. Hope you have fun. When you have an activity that involves a lot of materials, you want to make sure that all of the materials are easily accessible. I like to give the learners a job or a way to be involved in the session. So for example, if we have to pass out tape for the lesson, I say, okay, which one of my leaders is going to help me pass out tape today? Making them feel empowered, again, is an important part of the setup, and mentally preparing them. I think that's a big component as well. On your table, you should already have about 10 inches of tape. This isn't just any tape. This is space tape. Yes.
So what are things that you noticed during the video about how they prepare? Put some ideas in that chat box. You'll see a few notes that I put in there, but I want to hear what you think too. One of the things I like about this video is it really helped kind of make it clear how connected different parts of the experience are. How you set up the space, if you have the ability to move things around, if impacts how included learners feel, whether they feel like they're included and empowered. And whether they feel included and empowered affects how well they're able to learn the content. So all of these things are connected together. As we prepare for the learning experience, we make it easier for our learners to get out of that experience what we want them to do. And one of the things Erica just pointed out, and I noticed that in the video too, is these guys actually spend quite a bit of time preparing. We don't always have that much time preparing, but thinking about what they're going to present, how they're going to present it, and making sure that they're familiar with the content before they get started. These are all strategies that build their own confidence and then make the experience go better for the students. The learners and the leaders, as Olivia says here. Well, thank you very much. And I invite you, if you have more ideas or observations, feel free to share those. And I will take us back to the PowerPoint. All right, now we are moving on to step 4. Oh, excuse me. I did not do that right. Let me try one more time. There we go. You don't want to see how messed up my desktop is when I try to do one of these webinars. I've got windows open everywhere. All right. So the 4th step in our plan is to actually make that planning document or whatever you're going to do. So we've been preparing ourselves. Now we're going to put together the plan. I like to have a written plan, and even for a webinar like this, I have a plan written out so I know what the different parts of the webinar are going to be, and I have a sense of how much time I want to spend on each one and can manage that. So I am someone who really likes to write it all out, but not everyone plans in that way. Some people will just take the curriculum for their activity, copy off that activity they're going to do, and make some notes on that piece of paper and not mess with a template like this. And I think those are both good strategies depending on what best suits you. But however you decide to put together your plan, it is important to take some time before you start the activity to think about how you're going to manage your time and how you're going to manage the supplies so that things can go smoothly. So the template I am showing here comes from another one of our PD resources called Plan and Prepare. And I will put that link in the chat for you again. And all of these links are going to be posted with the recording of the webinar, so you don't have to copy them all down now. But I just wanted to have them there if people wanted to check it out as we're going through the webinar. So the Plan and Prepare professional development guide is another one. This one I think is just 20 minutes long, and it introduces this template, talks about the different purposes or the different parts of the template, and gives that to your staff as another tool that they can use. And as I said, some people like to have a template like this, others have a different way of doing it. The crucial point is to plan, to think about what is the focus of the activity and how does everything flow from that focus. And that's a crucial point here that I want to make. We've got a whole page, but it's the learning outcomes at the top that I think are the most important when you're planning an activity. So we've got 2 different types of learning outcomes on this template. We have STEM practices and STEM concepts. The practices are the things that students are learning how to do. So They're learning how the engineering process is used by engineers, or they're learning how to collect and record data. Those are the STEM practices, and that's an important outcome. We want them to learn and be comfortable with those practices. There's also STEM concepts, like they're learning about momentum, and that's a concept. And they may use a practice like experimenting to learn about a concept too. So you may have just one outcome that's either a practice or a concept, or you may use both. But whatever your focus is for this activity, what you want them to learn from it is really going to shape how you present it, how you introduce it, the questions that you ask during the activity. So it all flows from knowing what your outcomes are. And it's not just what are the outcomes of the activity as it's written, but what is it you really want the young people you're working with to take away from this experience? Do you want them to be more excited about STEM? Do you want them to see themselves as someone who does STEM? Those are also valuable outcomes of a STEM learning experience, and they're going to shape the types of questions you ask and the way you present the content. So it's important to think about all of these things as you're putting together your plan. Sometimes it's easier to think about just answering the question, why are we doing this activity? What do I want them to get out of it? And then use that to shape your next steps. So those are the 4 steps. Step 1 was find the activity. Step 2, assess it, decide if it's a good quality activity or if there's things you need to add to make it a good quality activity. Prepare yourself if there's things you need to know, background you need to get, or supplies you need together. Think about those things. And then when you've got all the pieces, you're going to put it together into a plan. And I'll pause for just a minute if you have any questions about those 4 steps. The next thing we're going to do is try it out with an actual activity. So that may make it more clear, but before we try it and implement these steps, I wanted to give you a chance to ask some questions. All right, so we're going to plan an egg drop activity. Part of the reason I selected this is there's so many different outcomes that you can focus on if you're doing an egg drop activity. It can be an activity that really focuses on practices, on the experimenting, on engineering design, on the practices side. There's also some great concepts that you can cover about materials or about physics. So all of those things have a potential within this activity. So I thought it was a good one to think about because how we focus is going to affect how we present this activity. We do have an egg drop activity on the Click to Science website, and it is an activity that was selected specifically to help you think about STEM practices and to think about how you structure the activity as you're planning and preparing. So this is a good choice for our webinar today. You can download the activity using the link here, or just think about what you know about an egg drop activity. But that's our first step. We're finding the activity. Step 2, we're going to assess the quality of this activity. And that 9-point checklist may not all apply to us depending on where our focus is. Looking at the checklist and the Click to Science version of this activity, it does have some great ideas about connecting to STEM careers and encouraging collaboration and working together. That's what I like best about this write-up of the egg drop activity. So that's probably what I'm going to focus on, but look through the rest of it just to make sure. It has some ideas for connecting to the everyday lives of youth, but I think I'm going to have to rely on my own experience to see if those connections are really relevant to the youth in my program. So I want to make this an inclusive activity. I want them to get excited about it. So I'm going to look and think about whether the hook, the frame that we're using about being a materials engineer is going to work for the youth in my program. The other thing I'm going to have to do as I go through this, the checklist reminded me that I may need to make some adaptations for youth with special needs, because that's not written into the activity. But if there's something in particular that I need to address in my youth, I can do that as I'm planning the activity. I do like the questions that are in this activity for reflection. It includes questions that you can use in the design process, like how does your design work, and why did you decide to build it in that way? So those are good questions there, but then there's also questions you can ask later in the activity, like what elements from other groups' packages could be combined to improve your own. Another thing I like about this version of the activity is they have a chance to design their container for their egg, test it, and then come back the next day and redesign their container. So they have that chance to make improvements. There aren't a lot of connections to the concepts that are involved in this activity. So there's some physics here. There's definitely some things about materials that could be brought out in the activity, but they're really not focused on in this activity. I'm okay with that because I really want to focus on the practices, but you're going to have to look at what your purpose is here as you're deciding whether that is an appropriate activity or if you need to make changes to it in order for it to meet your needs. Then we're ready for step 3, which is prepare yourself. And that involves taking some time to think about the materials, to think about what you know about this activity, and what you need to know in order to be successful. And I happen to have a video here of Denise and Jaime as they are preparing to do this activity. So we're gonna go watch that video and see what it is that they are doing as they prepare. So as we watch this video, I want you to take some notes again. What are the decisions that they're making as they prepare, and what are the outcomes that they've decided to value?
First, we got some bubble wrap, your cardboard box, 2 rags.
Listen and watch as Denise and Jaime prepare to facilitate the STEM activity with youth. Look for ways that they have organized the materials to ensure for the successful STEM outcomes of the activity. With communication and pre-planning, staff are confident and comfortable leading the activity and are able to focus on ensuring STEM learning by youth.
Packaging engineers, they're the ones who construct and build the actual blocks. They do a lot of different sciences like physics, chemistry.
Do you think that packaging engineers just plan on one drop? No, they plan on anything that could happen from point A to point B, right?
When we pick an activity, I make sure that I have a lot of background information.
We account for mistakes or issues or anything that could come up along the way, you know, and we pre-plan on how we could avoid it or how we could get around it. Typically, we'll get together and we'll pull out our curriculum, and as we're picking every activity, we collaborate on it. Like, does this sound like a cool activity to run? Yep, like the kids will be into it. What are the things we need? What are the things we need to prepare for?
And then we'll put these 2 straws.
Something that helps us a lot in being prepared for the lesson is trying it beforehand. We always jump on the opportunity to test run it, so that way the day of, we know how it's going to come out. When it comes to materials, we have an awesome director that we pretty much could just hand her the list of materials of stuff that we need, and she'll run out and get it for us.
And just making sure we have everything that we need just makes everything go really smooth.
Is there any more combos I would do?
Yeah, you guys want more cotton balls? I'll go ahead and bring you guys some. This is your regs. Your guys' regs are right here. Be careful. Remember, this is all you guys are getting. That's where the egg's gonna stay.
But then we're gonna need sides.
What are you guys putting on the sides? The cotton ball or the bubble wrap? Which one do you guys think is gonna work better?
We can put the cotton balls on the bottom. Okay, yeah.
On the side? That's good.
So open up that chat box and share what you notice about their process of preparing. Yeah, it is nice to be able to have the time to run through an activity. Not always possible though. That's one of the advantages of the Click to Science videos, that you can kind of at least see a little bit about what might happen so that you can think about what could go wrong or what might or might not work in your program. So what were the things that they thought about that helped keep the activity running smoothly? One of the things I noticed is how they thought about how they were going to organize the supplies and how they had all the supplies for one group in a bag. That really helps keep things moving smoothly if you don't have to have a lot of time managing supplies during the activity. How to time it, how to use the time that they have allotted. And they planned from the beginning that this was going to be a 2-day activity. So they would have the first day to make a prototype and go out and test it, knowing when they tested it on the sand that the test the next day was going to be more difficult. So we'll see that a little bit later. The day one, they tested it off of one of the pieces of playground equipment over the sand. Day two, they actually tested it over the cement and they were up higher. The other thing I noticed during the activity is that they were focused on practices, and Denise shared the engineering design process as a visual on the board to help keep everyone thinking about how this is what engineers do. And then the questions that Jaime asked really brought it back to what do you think engineers do when they're doing this type of work? So those are all the things that you can think about as you're preparing yourself to know what the content is and what sort of background information you need. Then you're ready to make a plan. And again, the first thing to think about when you're putting together that plan is what is the learning goal, because everything else is going to flow from that goal. If you aren't clear on what the goal is, it's hard to plan the rest of the activity. If you use the STEM planning template, it's going to help you focus on that. And then to think about how are you going to manage your time, how are you going to manage your materials, all of those things are covered by the template. Another important point you'll notice on the template is how you're doing the hook, the introduction to the activity. What are you going to do to spark interest? In this case, they're using that idea of you're a materials engineer who is designing the container for shipping these eggs in. And you have to think about all the things that might happen to that egg between the farm and the market that it's going to. The other thing that the learning goal helps drive is it helps you think about what types of questions, what are the things you want the youth to reflect on. You're not going to ask them all types of questions, you're going to be very purposeful, and the learning goal really helps direct that and keep that focused. And then you need to think about your time, when you're going to ask those questions, and how you're going to connect it back. One of the important things to keep in mind, I think, with hands-on learning is the learning doesn't really happen during the hands-on or the building part. The learning takes place as they're reflecting on what they did. So it's really crucial that you build in that time for reflection. And if you're a program where you kind of have about a third of the kids gone by the time you get to 4:45 and you're ready to do your reflection, then you might want to think about how you can build some of that in before the end of the activity, because everyone that got picked up early isn't getting that benefit of reflecting the experience if they've already gone home. And then you also need to have a plan B, because there are things that could go wrong. We talked about that earlier, anticipating what those problems might be. So no matter how hard you plan, there are things that could go wrong. And part of the planning process is anticipating those challenges. So those of you that have done this sort of activity before, what could go wrong on an egg drop? What are some things that you've noticed that have impacted this activity? Sometimes you're limited in what supplies you have available. So you're going to have to plan an activity that can do with minimal supplies. You're going to have to think about where you're going to drop your eggs and how that can be done safely, both for the person who's up high dropping and for the kids that might be down below, so that nobody gets hurt. And then there's always the rainy day plan. So what could you do with this activity if it starts to rain? Any ideas in the chat box? Oh, we could do the activity inside. That's a good idea. So what were how would you have to adjust your plan if you had to do it indoors? Would you need to get a ladder from a custodian? Would that be helpful? Great ideas in the chat box. Thank you. So it's very important that you have a plan, and then it's also important to have a plan B, to think about what are the things that could go wrong and how would I adapt to those changes. Marcia suggested that sometimes they've used noodles rather than eggs for this, or plastic eggs. So those are things that if you need to make that choice, you want to make it early in your planning process so that you have the plastic eggs ready and you don't have to go buy real eggs. So that's really the process that we want you to think about. Let me go back one slide. Step one is to find an activity. And remember that Click to Science blog has some good ideas about where you can find activities. And then you're going to assess that activity to make sure it has the quality indicators that are important to you. We've got 9 of them on the quality checklist that you can use. And if there's pieces that are missing, you want to think about how to fill those in, how to add to the activity to make it meet your needs and to be a high quality STEM activity that's going to really engage young people, that's got a great hook that they're going to get excited about, and it connects to their own experience and they feel included and empowered through that activity. That's what you're doing at in that second step to really make it a good quality STEM activity. Then you need to think about what are the things you need to do to prepare yourself, what supplies do you need, how are you going to organize this? And then when you've got all those pieces together, you can actually set out your plan with a clear learning goal that really it directs how you're sparking interest, how you're structuring the time, how you're reflecting on that experience so that they get the most they can out of what you have planned. And I think this is a great activity now because there's so much shipping that goes on. It is part of our everyday experience. And nobody likes it when their TV arrives and the screen is broken. So this is an activity that's really relevant, I think, to a lot of young people today, just because there's a lot of shipping in our lives. All right, 3 key takeaways. I told you this is going to be a really simple process, and that means it's a short webinar today. There are a lot of different ways that after-school programs plan for STEM learning. Some programs have staff plan and prepare each lesson that they're going to teach on their own. Some have one person, maybe a program coordinator or director or STEM expert who plans all the STEM activities and then hands them to people who are going to facilitate them. In that case, you're going to use these resources a little bit differently because you're going to have some parts of the decision-making process that are made by the person who's planning the activity. They're the ones who are going to select those learning goals and outcomes. But there's also parts of the process that need to be done by the person who's presenting it. They need to make sure that they're comfortable with the content, ask questions of the person who wrote the activity if they don't understand how things are structured. Some programs require whoever's leading an after-school club to submit a plan ahead of time about what they're going to do. Before the quarter even begins, they have to have it planned out. And all of those are good ways to plan. The important thing is no matter which strategy you use to plan your STEM activities, that I hope you can use these resources to empower the people who are doing that planning and make them feel more confident that they can really design learning experiences that are engaging and maximize the safety and inclusion of all young people. So here are the 3 key takeaways, and I will include all of these links that I shared during the webinar with the recording. So, well-prepared STEM learning experiences always have a clear goal and focus, and that really directs how that learning experience occurs. Well-prepared learning experiences are relevant, engaging, and appropriate for the youth that they're designed for. And you may need to make adaptations to what is generally planned for the specific audience that you're using that with. So make it appropriate for the youth in your program. And planning helps you maximize youth engagement, helps you create a safe and inclusive environment for kids to spend their after-school hours and to learn. So I hope you had a great webinar today. Thank you for joining us. Next month, our webinar is going to be on February 5th. That's a little bit earlier than we normally do because of some conferences and travel I have in February. And the theme is going to be Pathways to Digital Careers. So we're focusing on helping young people learn about careers, but specifically around digital careers, coding, designing, those sorts of things. So I hope you're able to join us next time on February 5th. Thank you all.